morning, good morning. Now we'll do a little bit outside. Good morning, Caroline. All right. Shabbos, good Shabbos. Do we have the,
Good morning.
I sent it to good morning.
I have the sushi for good, yeah.
I sent it to Caroline. Hi, Caroline, we can start. So let's put the blessings and Torah up, okay? Good morning. Shabbos. All right, everybody, here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'tzosav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. We're going to do two pieces from the Hasidic masters. I don't have any source sheets. I sent them to Victor, but it might not, or someone could do it here. But we're just going to look. I have one, and we're going to look at one online. And if they print them, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. But we don't need to print them. People can look online. I don't know what people actually write on them or anything. We'll just look online. It's okay. All right. So as soon as you put it up, that'll be great. If you want to give me control, also I can do it from here. It's up to you. All right. Morning, Kriyas Torah. We're going to be looking at two shtickles, two Hasidic Torahs this morning about Revelation at Sinai. And that should take us through with all the comments and also the learning until 9:45. So the teaching from the Degel Machaneim Ephraim is the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, has within it a very well-known parable. It's very much a part of the Hasidic, early Hasidic literature. And it was a parable that helped to explain the difference between a chassid and a non-chassid, and in some ways it's not altogether different from other. I guess you'll see. It's an interesting parable that has legs. The Degel writes, and on the whole, all the people could see the voices. The synesthesia, right? So this is at the end, after the Asara Dibrot, after the 10 utterances, the Torah records these verses in, I think it's chapter 20, verse 15, or the end over there. It says that the people saw the voices. What does it mean to see the voices? So presumably it's a moment of synesthetic ecstasy. The original word for ecstasy was to be outside of the body. So they were completely disembodied. And that which was the limits of the embodied sensory universe were transcended at that moment. It's kind of a descriptor of the awesome nature of this event. And immediately after that, the Torah tells us that they said that they were afraid. And the people said they were afraid. And they were trembling. And they stood at a distance. This is kind of the immediate precursor to their sense of this is overwhelming and we can't handle it, right? They said, like, you should speak, let God speak to you, and well, you'd be the one to tell us, okay? So this is the Degel here, picking up on this very strange, the seeing of the voices. I mean, I don't know that he had access to synesthesia as a concept, that they see what they normally hear and they hear what is normally seen. But he says something in the name of his grandfather that tries to make sense of seeing sound. What does it mean to see sound? He says, Aldas Sheshamati, I heard a parable from my holy grandfather. That there was one who was a musician once who was playing an instrument in a very sweet and pleasurable way. It's like Perlman, I don't know, Tommy Emmanuel, I don't know, face me, somebody playing a very sweet instrument, right? And the sweetness and the pleasantness was very arivut, it was very pleasant and sweet. The osam shem shomim זה לא יכול להתאפק מגול המסיקוס והתענוג אשר היו רוקדים כמעט עד לתקרה. I taught this earlier this week. It's like an amazing phrase. Those who are listening, otam shem shomim, the ones who are listening to this, lo yachlu tapek, they couldn't control themselves from the great sweetness and pleasure until they were dancing almost to the ceiling. And then I said, oh, what a feeling to be dancing on the ceiling, and the students who were under 40 had no idea what the heck I was talking about. So it was I was like, I said, Jason Mraz, I don't know, it was like, I gotta have that, got that feeling. So they were dancing. They couldn't stop dancing, right? Like a Romemu service, a DJ service, some kind of ecstatic, a rave. But then, bum, 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 karov yoser, because of the great joy, the pleasure, right, the ecstasy, they couldn't stop moving. It moved them so much. And the closer you came to it, the one who was closer to it, right? Those who wanted to, the closer you got, the better it was, right? They wanted to be on the stage, right? They wanted to be in the symphony, they wanted to be in the orchestra. They didn't have the cheap seats. They wanted to get closer. The closer you got, the sweeter it was. And they would continue, they would dance even more. And while this is happening, a certain person comes, who comes, Cheresh, somebody who can't hear, somebody who's deaf, he can't hear. He said, there's somebody came who couldn't hear the music, and he saw people dancing. He saw them dancing and thought, there must be mishuggahs. Must be crazy. What are they doing? Must be out of their minds. Can't hear the music, so I don't know why they're moving like that. He says in his heart, this person says in his heart, Ki l'simcha ma zeh oseh. Now this quote is a paraphrasing of Ecclesiastes. What is this joy all about? What's the good of all this joy? Right? Why are they dancing? I mean, I hate to draw parallels, but everything in Torah, it's like you start learning pieces. If you learn it more than once, by the way, it's even better, because then you realize, oh my gosh, this is what this week, and that's when I mean, seeing Serena Williams dancing her little crip dance, it's like people are like, what is she doing? What's that little dance she's doing over there? But if you know that you hear the music on every level. It wasn't just the music that was there, but it was the music of, what happened at the Olympics, and so on. It's the history. You don't know the history. You're looking, you're going, what is all this? Right? That may be nothing. So he says, what's this joy? Mazo said, if the person was wise, the Yoda and knew and understood, so if he could hear the music, I mean, he blames him here a little bit, but if he was a wise person and knew, again, the parable has all kinds of potential flaws, but in general, the theory here is that if he could hear the music, he too would be dancing, and maybe he's also saying, even if you can't hear the music, you must deduce that people don't just get up and dance like that. They don't just, I'm going to start dancing. So stop your judgments and try to investigate what's going on over there, right? And then maybe you also would be dancing. And he says, and one can understand this application in the real world, the parables, referent. He says that's maybe what's happening here, where the Jewish people or the Israelites at Sinai are trying to visibly see the sounds, right? Says that the blessed Holy Creator manifested on all of them as one, God's divinity, right? And each one of them understood. Each one of them grokked it. They conceptually, they were able to download. How did they couldn't all get it, but they inferred from seeing the angels. There were angels dancing. There was joy. I mean, he's building his case not from the text, but from the rabbinic glosses and expansion of the text. And not only was there a joyous moment at Sinai, but the whole world was dancing because revelation was happening. It was craziness. And of course, the children of Israel who were there couldn't fully grok it. As they said, it's overwhelming to us. Right? In those verses where they said they saw the sounds, the context of those verses were the Israelites who couldn't hear it in its entirety because it was too much. But they could infer because they saw heavenly hosts dancing. And they said to themselves, oh, we want to see what they're hearing. We can only see it, but we want to hear it too. We want to dance like them. שהוא בוודאי את הקולות, היינו נעימוס והרבוס הקול של תורה. אף על פי שהם לא השיגו זה בנעימוס התורה. Says they saw the angels dancing, they saw the angels, and they couldn't, they themselves were a little bit, I skipped a little bit, they themselves were a little bit on the side of those who couldn't hear fully. Right? They said Nasa v'nishma, they couldn't hear it entirely. There's something about their own capacity to fully engage in the frequency that was being offered. But nonetheless, dachaku atzmam, they forced themselves, they pushed themselves, lishma kol Torah, to hear the sound of Torah, to hear the sound of revelation, to hear the sound of God, of aliveness, of spirituality, of truth, whatever it might be. Even though they were a little bit hard of hearing. Like they were also going, what? They're all going, well, what? Can you say, what? Say it again. And you can see all 3 million of them, they're going like this, like leaning to the right, like talking to my good ear. What? I can't hear you. But I can hear that, I can see that everybody's dancing. And they didn't close themselves off from the possibility that what they were not hearing was still real. They did not close themselves off from the possibility that what they were not hearing, what wasn't fully in them, was nonetheless happening around them. And they gave it credence. Right? They didn't write it off. Right? But rather said to themselves, how can I develop the ability to hear this? I want to hear this. Right? I said last night in my sermon about this, because this is one of the Torah, not the specific Torah, but the general concept of humbling ourselves to hear Torah and listening for what we can't hear, right? And something in the silence is there. And I start talking about like my experience since the Super Bowl last week of reading about Kendrick Lamar's halftime show and how nasty. It was really an amazing thing just to read all of the comments. First of all, I thought, how do people have time to write? I'm accidentally reading this. Like I'm reading it because I read in the Times and I was fascinated. Somebody said there's a lot of medrash on it, so I said, okay, I want to know the medrash. I love medrash, and I also love art, where art requires people to lean in and understand symbolisms and things that are opaque. Art has to be, by definition, both transparent and also invite a deeper, approach to something. And I'm by nature I'm a bit of an esoteric person. I like to know what's invisible. And so while I was reading these things, I would then read the comments. I always like to scan and see what people, because I want to see what you read. So I'm reading and I can't believe people just like the invective and the closed-mindedness and the judgment it's one thing to say, listen, it's not my taste in music per se. And I would have had a more enjoyable time personally, but I could see clearly it resonates for a lot of people, and that's legitimate. I mean, of course, that's what it is to have different artistic tastes and so on. But people who were like, why does it have to be so deep? Why does it have to have so many layers? If it's so many layers, why should it be on a halftime show? Why should I'm like, who? It's like there are plenty of people dancing, and why don't you incline your ear a little to understand why they're dancing? It's like, maybe you'll start dancing if you start. I mean, I read a couple of articles. I thought to myself, wow, I got to talk to this guy. He's brilliant. His mamish making Torah, like all the references and the symbols. I was like, you go. This is unbelievable. I got to learn more about the way an artist like this thinks and creates and all the gaming and it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Maybe it wasn't the most entertaining for a lot of the people who are my age and have my particular background. Okay, so what? So why does it always have to be what you want and not what other people are dancing to? So it's just like anyway. So the dead guy. I don't know. It's just like I'm like I don't get it. Like I don't get it. I mamish don't get it. Maybe I should try to listen to them too. But I don't get it. Like if you're gonna spend 5 minutes in your life, like anyway. So he says, if you inclined yourself, they understood that other people were that the angels, as it were unbelievably ecstatic about it, and so they pushed themselves to see what they couldn't hear yet. The Kola Amroim is they saw the sounds, right? They wanted to see it, and then from seeing it, they wanted to hear it. Even though they couldn't actually see it, they grasped that the dancing was coming because of the sweetness of Torah, and they understood it was from the pleasantness of Torah. They forced themselves, they pushed themselves to hear the voice, mamash. And Hashem Atov, and God should bless us to do the same. He says to his Chassid, to open ourselves to hear the Torah that we know is there, or the sweetness that we know is there, but that we ourselves, the capacity, can't. That's the first Torah this morning. Okay, let's pause. And how many people heard that parable from the Baal Shem Tov? How many people heard that the Baal Shem Tov was essentially, what was the Baal Shem Tov saying? Baal Shem Tov was saying, we're the ones, right, who are, we Hasidim are the ones who have Torah that other people don't get, right? That's that we don't get the Torah, that they don't get our Torah. First of all, he's saying to them, it's okay, it's an acquired taste. But then it's even more, he says Chassidus is not just an acquired taste. Chassidus is those who can hear the sweetness of the divine, and then there are those who can't hear it. And he was saying to his Chassidim, the Baal Shem Tov was saying to his devotees, as almost you can imagine any other mystic. This is also a little bit dangerous because this is dog whistling. There are people who get it, those who don't get it. But he was saying, don't give up on the truth of what we've experienced, because it's just their inability to hear it that's happening. It's not that there is sweetness happening. There is music to dance on the ceiling to. But the other ones who like, they're right. They're the ones, they can't hear it, they can't see it. Now, it's really interesting, as I said, because this is a time-honored way of creating an inside and an outside. Because one could argue, you're the ones who are dancing to music that's not there. Like, we have good ears, thanks so much. We're not deaf, thank you very much. But we don't agree with you, and you're painting us in this way is a way of you're belittling us, right? You're saying, oh, you really can't hear it, and it's really your fault. And maybe others would say, well, you're not listening to something sweet, and you can tell me all you want that it's sweet, but I also have an ear, and I also have a musical attunement, and I don't dig the whole dancing business that you guys are doing, because I think it's the wrong thing to do in a shul. I think it's the wrong thing to do religiously. I think you should contain yourselves. We also hear God's sweetness, but we don't have to express it that way, right? Why, like, you're going to judge us and make sure that we all have to dance and everything, like you're going to forcibly make us ecstatic? Is that what's going to happen? Like there's going to be some hegemony now of we're going to go from being, the way things were to the way things are, and there's a new catechism. If you don't dance, it means that you must be deaf to the music of Chassidus, and all Chassidim have to be hard of hearing. So you could imagine that that this is almost an inevitable phenomenon. Like you can't imagine, like, because it wasn't just that the Litvishes, the people who were opposing Chassidus weren't just like, it wasn't just the people who were opposed to Chassidus were like, each to his own, each to her own, their own, like, you guys dance, we don't like to dance, there's multiple intelligences and different lines of development, everybody has their own way of doing it. We're more rational. We like to stay in a bit more of an intellectual space. We're the Reconstructionists. You guys be the Neo Hasidic renewal. You do your thing. It wasn't like live and let live. There were real stakes at play here. like the non-Hasidic groups eventually excommunicate the Hasidim. They eventually call them heretics on the line of like, dangerous. Like they are dangerous. So you can understand why the Baal Shem Tov could have used a much stronger parable, but he didn't. He didn't say that they were, idol worshippers or those who were, but he did want to inspire his people to say, you're not crazy. In order to say that, he also to say that they're not, well, they don't hear well, but he also wanted to say that you're not crazy. And it's a very powerful way to read the problem of the text. The text moves from being this magical moment of, ecstatic sensorial confusion or override to a moment of radical willingness to assert as a student of Torah or as a student of the world, my posture should be one of being curious. And in some way this becomes a patterning for a disciple relationship with truth, right? It becomes a patterning for, oh, I don't hear it, but it's still there. Let me work hard. Again, acknowledging that can be misused. Sometimes a teacher can misuse that curiosity and say that there's something there when there really isn't, in order to it can be fascistic, right? You tell a student, the student says, well, there's nothing there, Rabbi, and the Rabbi says, it must be that you haven't worked hard enough, right? I remember when I was a Gyrotonic devotee, which also had a cult-like atmosphere around the teacher, Julia Harbath, and there was one studio that I used to work out at, and then I eventually taught there in my 20s. And there was one guy, there were two German guys. One was a Capricorn, and one was a Cancer. They were like exactly 180 degrees from each other, Sebastian. And the Cancerian guy was he's still a friend on Facebook, and I check in with him every now and then. He was the sweetest guy. His name was Jürgen Habermas. He was like Jürgen Bamberger. Jürgen Habermas is a German philosopher. Jürgen Bamberger. And Jürgen was, when you studied with him, it was all love. Like mamish, everything he did, like, Gyrotonic is this movement system, and it's got very precise, like he would always look at me and be like, that's so beautiful, David, keep going. And it's like, movements, arching and curling, and you were doing this thing. And then there was the other guy, and also studied with him quite a bit, and nothing you did was good. Nothing you did was good. I start to move. I start moving. Goes, I was like, okay, what am I doing? Like, you're moving from your, it's like your chin is moving from the chest. I'd be like, I close my eyes, go like, okay, am I lifting enough? I'd be like, I start moving. Go, I was like, all them. It's like. Yeah, just hearing it, I know he was mamish, such a perfectionist, and they walked differently. Like he was very held, and Jürgen was like hanging out. And it was like, Apollonian and Dionysian. It was really intense, but the feeling was that you could never do it well enough, and so it was never about his own perceptual critique. It was about that you, as the student, it was too deep for me. Like you always left the session thinking, I didn't quite get it. I'm going to go home and work on that all the time. And so there is this other side of the teaching, but I would see it as the Baal Shem Tov's, the beauty of the Baal Shem Tov here is that he is inviting wisdom to be something that is not always available, or whatever revelation, or whatever the topic here is, but something that you can deduce from other people's joy or other people's experience. It's something that's worth our own humility and our willingness to go from seeing what is heard, hearing what is, right, that is causing so much joy. All right, let's open it up if there's any comments, and then we'll do the second Torah from the morning. Naim, in honor of the Chernobyl reactor, we're trying to close up the Chernobyl reactor today and help them, so we're going to learn Torah from the Rebbe of Chernobyl this morning after this. Okay, coming up. Thomas.
Just a story, very briefly inspired by your story. There's this famous phrase which speaks to this synesthetic translation between the seemingly eternal, the seemingly ephemeral, the seemingly stable, the seemingly mobile, maybe the seemingly spoken, the seemingly Apollinarian, the seemingly Dionysian, like which is which, and how do you translate permanence and transience, and your two instructors and their different spirits in a way, rigidity and mobility. And there's this famous phrase, maybe you know it, architecture is frozen music.
No.
Right? I love it, right? I love it. It's like instantly true when you hear it. And of course, beloved by architects, right? Because it's like, oh, yes. And you know, it's like rhythm, right? Boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, you know,
Yeah.
structure, tone, atmosphere, like everything. It's like they're so far apart, right? Like the ultimately material and the ultimately immaterial that they come back together. I just love that for years, an architect's love. And the question was, who said this, right? Like, who is the Rebbe who said this? And we trace it back, and the most credible attribution is to another German, Goethe, the great philosopher, right? And he was very activated in his visual field. He was obsessed with color and light, and so it makes sense that he was aware of design and architecture. And there are texts that support this. I became obsessed with this once, and I looked into it, and I, went deeper and deeper into the libraries. And the source, the reason it goes back to Goethe is in Goethe's diary. Goethe says, "Yeah, I was at a party. I was at a dance party. The 18th century like German version of a dance party." And he's like, "There's this amazing woman there." Who was probably Madame de Stael, if you've ever heard of her. She was a great intellectual. She was in correspondence with Voltaire and all these people. But because she was a woman, she had to find different ways, right? So she had salons, and she had dance parties, and this was her way, right? And so, in the diary, Goethe and the Madame are dancing, and they're debating while they're dancing, right? Because they're intellectuals, and they're like, yeah, what's what could be better than this, right? And Goethe, God bless him, says, architecture. like architecture takes all of this and it makes it solid, permanent, and it lasts forever, and you can go back and look at it again. You don't have to rely on your memory. It's like the temple, right? It's stone. And Madame de Stael said, architecture is only frozen music. It's not fresh. Right? It's not the real thing. It's not the truly eternal. Right? So it's actually entirely the other way around. Right? And she's more like Jürgen. She's valorizing the movement, right? And the dynamic and the elusive and the thing just like as soon as it comes, it goes, right? Like a stream of water, or like a memory, or a dream, or like music, right? And so, I love that, like, it maps onto this masculinity, this femininity, this permanence, this transience. These dualities that you are trying to get us past. I think.
Yeah, beautiful story. I mean, thanks for Madame de Stael. She's
it's
great.
She's my crush.
We're going to go to Jay in the Zoom. We'll come back to this beautiful story. It's a beautiful story, actually. Love it. Yeah, Jay.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm trying to think, am I being too harsh in a possible interpretation of the Mashal? And it's been a long time since I've read the sociology of the mob. But I see a potential commonality here of, mimicry, of contagion, of simply, somebody sees the angels dancing and they start dancing and everybody in the crowd starts dancing. And that's possibly what's going on as an alternative interpretation. And obviously, the literature of the sociology of the mob, of 80 years ago was obviously the potential harm of that kind of dynamic. And so I'm just kind of, the dark part of me is putting that out on the table as another interpretation of the mashal.
Yeah, I don't think it's harsh. I think, as I said, I don't think that what you're saying is altogether different than it's more fleshed out of what I said. It's a potential shadow of this teaching, but that the teaching is not unique. I think to the Baal Shem Tov. I think it's again a teaching about any one of these of a system. The potential danger of a system is for a very charismatic leader to say that there's something esoteric that only you have access to is it's very conspiratorial. But all esotericism is conspiratorial. It says essentially that there's something unseen that only few have access to, or only those who have the right apparatus, right, the right media outlet, or the right person interpreting it. That's essentially the danger in all of these parables or all these systems, but also their truth, which is why they're equally, maybe more forcefully dangerous, is because all things that have an element of truth to them can be distorted, right? Things that are altogether completely false, which is hard to find in its entirety, right? And the rabbis have taught that over and over again, that all lies, great lies, begin with a kernel of truth, right? And that's the story of the Meraglim, the story of the spies that come back and give a somewhat truthful response that they then distort, right? There might be, like, when we talk about vaccines, like, this Meshuggah now that's going to run our health industry. I mean, like, does he have some kernels of truth? Of course. It wouldn't be able to be, it doesn't get out of the gate unless there's like one little, then it becomes complete. Is the Baal Shem Tov right that there are truths that people, it's obvious, of course, that there are truths that people who don't have that apparatus can't see, whether it's a telescope, you can say, no, what do you mean that we revolve around the sun? The sun, you look at it clearly, the sun, like, anything without an apparatus, people make fun of mindfulness, make fun of meditation. And someone would say, listen, if you've ever been on a silent retreat, right? Ayahuasca. If you've ever done ayahuasca, If you've ever done mushrooms, If you've ever been to Romemu, right? Right? It's not like, they're all in the same, right? Right? If you've ever gone to this restaurant, so this parable, of course, is in some way very obvious. I mean, it's almost like he's saying an obvious truth, which is that those who are often those who are judgmental of a phenomena, right, do so not from the inside, but from having never known it, and so their credibility is lacking. Of course, what do you do about somebody who did listen to the music and now is no longer interested in listening to the music and is willfully deaf to it, or refuses to listen to it because that's, phenomena of somebody that's always most dangerous is somebody who was once a devotee that has left the fold, right? And there's a particular ire involved now in our country where those who once were dancing to a particular despotic music became out and wrote books, and then that had to become conspiratorialized, right? So it's like an Ashurian confusion around this. But I just loved that there is, again, emphasis on the listener to hear the music, or the emphasis is on the listener's willingness to hear the music. I think, yeah. And the second thing is also,
I think what the Michelle adds, though, is it's not just the charismatic leader. Maybe it's even more the acolytes, the people who are next to you who are dancing, and that's right. More immediate.
Right. No, I was going to go there. So I was going to finish my little thing there by coming back to what you were saying, and to lift up what you were saying and saying that another element of this that needs to be included, obviously, is here's the real danger, is that the acolytes don't actually ever hear the music. They just spend their lives trusting that the Baal Shem Tov and others said there was music to listen to, and they're dancing without having heard the music. And there they become, right, that's the worst, because they are no different than the ones who danced, who refused to dance or wondered why the dancers were dancing because they're a bunch of crazies. And they've lost their capacity to be critical in the way that the outsiders say there is no music. The emperor has no clothes. And they know there's no music. At least they haven't heard it yet. But they take it on trust. And they take it on faith. And then they get everybody else to say, and they say to them, did you hear the music? And say, do I have to hear the music? If the Rebbe said that there's music, then there's music, right? Who needs to be like, who am I? And then they create, and talk about frozen architecture or frozen music. Then they say that no one has to hear the music, because to hear the music is already audacious of you. Who are you to hear the music? Only the great Rebbes hear the music. Only Moshe, only the angels. Do you deign yourself to be an angel? You're going to hear the music? You should just dance, because we have a tradition that angels dance. And then it becomes fifth hand smoke, on Shabbos you can drink tea not from the first cup, but from the third cup. You're not supposed to drink boiling water in the first cup. You're not supposed to cook on Shabbos. So they have something called the Kli Rishon, the first vessel, second, just to pour from one vessel to another until finally get the third one, not scalding hot. So now you have third vessel revelation, eighth vessel revelation. You have like people, right, who, if God forbid you even say, I'm not sure if there's any music left anymore. Then you're like, oh, you're a heretic. It's like, okay, so that's also, and then it becomes a movement, and the acolytes, they force other people, and what Jay was alluding to becomes really fascistic, and I love that you brought that. Okay, so are we going to get to the morning nine from Chernobyl? I think we have to. Let's do it, okay? Let's do the next piece. Okay, what time is it? Okay, good. All right. You just do the Hebrew. I'll do the Hebrew out loud, and you guys will look at the English. No. Do the Hebrew, because I didn't put it side by side. It was too. I wanted to. Yeah. Here. So this goes back to the beginning of the parsha. The beginning of the parsha, it says that before Revelation at Sinai, Jethro comes along, and Jethro throws up. Yitro shows up, and he comes to bring his daughter and like Moshe's wife and children back to Moshe. Apparently they weren't all together. And while he's there, he's first received very, very cordially by Moshe, lovingly. Moshe feeds him, and then Yitro witnesses Moshe's daily routine, which is like adjudicating and watching over the people from morning until evening. And Jethro says to him, "Oh, my Tyra son-in-law, my sweet and amazing son-in-law, no, it's not a good thing what you're doing. You're going to burn yourself out, and it's not going to be good for anybody." And he gives him all this good advice, right? But what troubles the commentators is that it says Vayishma Yisro, and Jethro heard everything that God had done, right? And like how he had behaved with the Israelites and how he split the sea and all these things. But apparently, the text itself, which says what he heard and the reason for his coming, is insufficient to answer why it says, and Jethro heard and came. In other words, what report it says that it doesn't say specifically in the text what he heard. It just says he generally heard all the things that God had done for the Israelites and for the people of Israel, right? But when the rabbis come to comment on what he heard, they say, what did he hear that made him come? And then they specify the splitting of the Red Sea and the war with Amalek. So that commentary itself seems to be unnecessary. In other words, a rabbinic gloss on what exactly did Jethro hear that brought him to join the Jewish people is itself unnecessary. Why specify the actual specific things that he heard? The splitting of the Red Sea. He heard about the splitting of the Red Sea. That was amazing. And he heard about the war with Amalek. That was incredible. But we already are told in the text itself says that he heard all the things that God did. He said, okay, I'm coming. And by the way, it's also curious. Why did he have to hear about all the things God did for the Israelites and for the Jewish people? Why did he need that? Why can't he just say that he came to hang out with his son-in-law and to bring Tzipporah? And right, the whole thing is very odd. So here's the Chernobyl Rebbe, Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl, on that whole morass. Okay? And in his inimitable Hasidic way, you'll see that he's really just interested in getting to his Hasidic teachings, right? His spiritual teachings. Vayishma Yisro uperish Rashi. Mashmu Shama Uba. Rashi, the great 11th century French medieval commentator, asks, Mashmu Shama Uba. What news did he hear? It says that he heard something. What did he hear? And therefore, what forced his hand to come? It was Kriyat Yamsuf Milchamas Amalek. He heard about the splitting of the Red Sea and the war of Amalek. And the Chernobyl Rebbe right? That is very curious. It says, but the verse explicitly tells us what he heard. He heard all the things that God did. Why did Rashi leave the absolutely explanatory and sufficient simple meaning of the text and run after a midrash? The simple meaning of the text is he heard. Why did Rashi feel the need of, as other rabbis did, to say, it wasn't just that he heard everything, he heard specifically the splitting of the Red Sea and the war against Amalek. Achin emes noda. Says, the truth is, it is known. The Torah was given to us to give us guidance, to show us the way. To ascend on the path to the house of God, to Beit El, right? Ha'oleh, right? Harama l'davka b'av mitzvosav kamama razal barasi yetzara barasi tavlin. So he says that it is the way for us, right? The Torah is our way to cleave to God and to God's, spiritual practices, as it's taught in the Talmud. I created the evil inclination, and I also created Torah as its tavlin, as its antidote, right? He's going to underscore this idea, right? Let's just skip to, right? It's a beautiful Gemara, by the way, that you should all hear. The Gemara in Sukkah says that if you run into the despicable one and you run into the menuvalze, which means the Yetzer Hara, you should drag it to the Beit Midrash. And if it's a stone, it will dissolve. Right? The Torah, right, will help you. I mean, it's not always. I definitely have had the Yetzer Hara with me in the Beit Midrash, without a doubt. It's not 100, but I love that learning Torah is seen as an antidote to, or spiritual practice is seen as an antidote to the natural inclination towards selfishness and egocentrism and so on. So he says, but yet I see that there are many who study Torah with great intellectual rigor, yet they remain distant from the fear of God and from God's service. In other words, what I just said, their evil inclination remains intact. It doesn't dissolve, and it isn't shattered, right? He says, if this was good advice, the Gemara says, go learn Torah, and you'll become, you'll evolve. He says, wait a second, that can't be enough. Not just like the act of learning Torah, but there has to be some other thing itself, right? There's something else that is an ingredient in how you learn. Of emes, davar barur hu shegam Torah ein lehem, she'av pi shalomdim ein nikra etzlam Torah ki bechinas mash shenikra Torah liyosa more derech la'avodas Hashem Yisbarach v'notenes eitzel l'davka b'Hashem Yisbarach lo l'zulaso v'hein einam lomdim l'kavana zu. He says, if you're learning Torah, this is very interesting historically. We don't have to go into it right now completely, but this is also a Hasidic polemic. Right? In Hasidus, the goal of, and a lot of us would identify with this, by the way. The goal of religious practice is not religious practice, but what it does to you. Right? You say, of course, but it's actually not obvious. The goal of religious practice is to be obedient to God. God says, keep the Torah, and we say, well, what's in it for me? You can imagine that itself is egoic. In other words, someone would come along and say, the fact that you want to take all of Torah and all of religious life and reduce it to psychology is itself the greatest, egoic move you could imagine. Like, I should be religious because it's good for me? What do you mean it's good for me? Who are you? What is good for you? You should keep Torah because God said so. Because there's a greater authority than your own self that's at play. Like for moderns, we hear that and we say no. But by the way, if you would pick up a book on Zen and hear a Zen master say, "Are you sitting in Zen in order to be enlightened?" You are not less enlightened than when you try to become enlightened. Doing it for your own purposes, right? Like there is in all of the religious systems in both East and West, there is a critique of this mode, and it is not without merit. It is also not itself, it's also not, it doesn't speak to me completely. I think that there's something dangerous about that critique. But you're hearing him saying, someone who studies Torah and isn't asking Torah to give it the person advice. The person might learn Torah because they want to know about Abraham. I want to know about Abraham. I want to know about who Abraham was. I want to know who Isaac was. You say, why? Because, what do you mean? Because I'm Jewish. This is my lineage. I want to know about how people kept Shabbat. What if I have Shabbat and it's not the most refined spiritual experience of all time? What if I'm like keeping Shabbat and I don't feel that Shabbat makes me remember the Creator, but I keep Shabbat because I want to be a sociological Jew? Is that okay? So according to the Rebbe from Chernobyl, he says there are people who learn Torah, but they're not asking Torah the right questions. They're learning Torah because they want to learn Torah. Or they're learning it because it's a mitzvah. Or they're religious but like, if you ask Torah to give you advice on how to curb your ego, on how to be closer to God, then, and only then will Torah then reveal itself in that way. Yeah, Devorah. Oh, I don't know. Let's finish the Torah. We'll come back to the practicality. I'm sorry, Caroline. I just want to finish this because it's not, you didn't come in for Lana yet, and I feel like we need to see it all the way through it. So, and then we'll come back to because there's in it something that I mentioned last night in Shul. So he says, there are many people who study Torah, he says there are people who are learning Torah and like they put up their degrees. They say like, oh, I'm such a big, I have this and I have a PhD in Talmud, and that's a good thing. I'm just saying, from his perspective, it's also like, look at me. I'm like, look, I really know a lot of Torah, right? And they say like they use Torah as a kind of resume builder for how powerful they are and how enlightened they are, right? And those people, he says, are not, they take pride in their learning, blending good with evil, and this was the sin of Adam and eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, mixing holiness with impurity. The purpose of Torah study, says, is hearing the Torah's voice. The root of their failure to draw closer to the divine service, despite their Torah study, lies in the fundamental principle articulated by our sages regarding the essence of learning Torah. They commented on the verse, but it delights, right? This is from the first Psalm in the 150 Psalms that I mentioned this last night. That in the beginning, B'tchila nikra Torah Hashem, U'sha'amel ba nikra Torah. Says that in the beginning it's called the Torah of God, but afterward it's called your Torah. The sages explained that at first the Torah is called the Torah of God, but once a person labors in it, it becomes your Torah. Why is this so? Would it not just be sufficient to always call it God's Torah? The explanation lies in understanding that Torah is a guide, and therefore every person must listen to its voice as one listens to a teacher. This is amazing. The Chernobyl says when you learn Torah, you should ask it to speak directly to your heart and say, what are you trying to tell me? Now you're all going, yeah, that sounds like the kind of Torah I like to learn, right? You're like, oh, that's good. And you can imagine as an 18th century student of the Maggid Mezrish and also student of the Baal Shem Tov, this was his way of distinguishing the way the Hasidim learned Torah and the way that, let's say, Litvisher, Lithuanian, Talmudists, who were known for their very erudite and intellectual understanding of Torah. It's like you should walk out of a lesson of Hasidic Torah, he was saying to students, not necessarily having like a brilliant epiphany about like some intricate nuance of the text, but somehow the Torah spoke in your idiom for you. Say, oh, I got something from my own Torah from this. He says, that's why it couldn't just be God's Torah. It has to be your Torah. You make it it has a voice. It says, so the Torah itself directs a person in their learning and in their service. When a person learns Torah in this way, heeding its voice, listening to its voice, it's then called your Torah. Meaning it becomes uniquely personal to that person and guiding the path. Now, what is it like? What did the prior meaning of it's your Torah? It means like you worked at it, you accomplished it, you could put your name under it. Like this is my Torah, right? People write books, they say this is my Torah. But he's saying before that you name it in the world as your Torah, it has to be literally the Torah that was designed just for you. That's what it means yours. Not your Torah as in possessed Torah, but in curated Torah, in personalized Torah. Like it's like, the monograph Torah. This is for you. It's like you open and say, this was written for me. Right? Not mine, but for me. And that's it. That's what he says. Isn't that beautiful? He says, now let's get back to the beginning with the question. He said, why did Rashi have to say that what Jethro heard was unique, And what brought him to Sinai was uniquely the splitting of the Red Sea and the war with Amalek. He says like this, if you go to the connection to the splitting of the sea, what brings a person to this level of truly hearing Torah, the answer lies in the splitting of the sea. Before a person can fully enter the wisdom of Torah, the sea of supernal wisdom must first be split open. The splitting of the Red Sea in the physical world mirrored an event in the spiritual world, the opening of the hidden realm of divine wisdom. And when the waters of the sea parted, so too did the waters blocking access to higher wisdom. And this is why the Jewish people were able to receive the Torah in such a short time, within only a few weeks, from their crossing of the Red Sea to standing at Mount Sinai on the 6th of Sivan. How is this possible? Just a short time earlier at the sea, they were steeped in idolatry. It's another rabbinic idea that the angels were arguing, these are idol worshippers, and these are also idol worshippers. Why should we save them? In other words, the Israelites and the Egyptians were on the same level. But the answer is that splitting of the Red Sea in the lower world caused a corresponding rupture in the upper world, and the sea of wisdom was split open, and Israel was able to enter into a higher state of divine consciousness. So this explains, I'll come back to this because it's very metaphysical, but it can be very, this explains Rashi's comment. What report did he hear that made him come? It was the splitting of the Red Sea and the war with Amalek. Why these two events specifically? After all, the entire world heard about the miracles of Egypt. Why did only Yisro respond? The answer is that Yisro had a holy spark within him. Yet even for a person with a spiritual predisposition, there must be a catalyst that opens the heart to listen. And that catalyst was the splitting of the sea. And just as Israel underwent a transformation when the upper sea of wisdom opened, Yisro also experienced a spiritual breakthrough. And this explains why Rashi mentions the war with Amalek. Amalek represents the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, the force of doubt and spiritual obstruction. I would say that I know it by heart, but I don't. So you have to go a little bit lower, Caroline, a little bit lower. That's it. The war against Amalek was not just a physical battle. It was a battle against the forces that prevent a person from hearing Torah and following its guidance. And so Yisro's transformation was due to two things: the splitting of the sea, which represents the opening of the gates of wisdom, and the battle against Amalek, which symbolizes the crushing of the evil inclination, right? If it's like a stone, it will dissolve, right? And Yisro's story here teaches us, as the Chernobler, that hearing Torah is not merely about knowledge. It's about inner readiness, the ability to let the divine wisdom penetrate us. But without this, Torah remains an intellectual pursuit and not a force that transforms our soul. Okay, so let's unpack this and make it our Torah. Okay, you can close the. Okay. What does it mean that Jethro heard the splitting of the sea, and the splitting of the sea represents the opening of upper wisdom? So it could very well be that the splitting of the Red Sea was an analog for attuning ourselves, let's say, to the possibility of the impossible. That there is, especially in someone who feels extremely far away, they won't come until there's an opening. They sense an opening above meaning. That they sense that there's that something they do will be received. Right? It's supernal wisdom above. Like, what's the splitting? The splitting of the Red Sea was, in a way, in the world in which something impossible seemed like an obstacle, the possible emerges, and we are like their assumption about what the next moment would be is subverted. Right? We thought we're dead, we're goners, and all of a sudden it opens, which becomes a metaphor for believing that in the structure of the universe there's the possibility of grace, there's a possibility of making a change, the possibility of something might be possible, right? And so Jethro hears about the splitting of the Red Sea means that I'm not being excluded, that there's something available, there's something that can really take place. And if I make an effort below, it's because there was a corresponding opening above, as it were.
Yes.
Right? And so it grounds him, it pulls him from, let's say, the inclination to give up or to remain at a distance. Like, because it seems possible, he wants to come and participate. Because it might matter, he wants to step in. And then he says the Amalek piece is that, he had to also work with his own doubts. Amalek represents doubt and inner uncertainty and so on. But the Chernobyl now has recast Jethro's arrival from a more broad, general, like, oh, he came because of all the things that happened, to very specific, like, coordinates. What brought Jethro close from very far away was that he thought that there was an opening now, and that after subduing his own doubt, he said, okay, I'm going to come. And for the Chernobyler, what might that look like for everybody here? Like he says, like, if that happens, he says, when you are willing to make Torah, or when you're, that happens when you think that Torah might change your life, or wisdom or teachings might change your life, that you expose yourself. I think there's something about, I don't know about you guys, but I'll stop here and then open it. I don't feel like the Chernobyl is saying that to learn Torah in this way can be incredibly risky. That to learn any subject in a way that's, or sacred wisdom or spiritual practice that is demanding of us, it's unique to us, it speaks to us, and also, right, we must show up ready to have that kind of Torah change us. And it seems that Jethro was a perfect student because he said, okay, something's happening, something's available, and I want to work with my own inner doubts, my own inner struggles. And so he reframes Jethro's arrival not as he heard big miracles, but he felt that there was a shift and that he could be a part of that paradigm shift. The Rebbe did all of this in one beautiful teaching. He said, learn Torah for its wisdom and its guidance, and be like Jethro, who arrives at Sinai knowing that there's now something available, so go get some, and work with your own inclination and your own uncertainty. There's an opportunism, like you see that when someone, like in the current reality, in our political realities, there's a lot of opportunists now who are jumping on the bandwagon. They say, there's something open now for us, right? Yes. Right? There's something available. We should go get some for ourselves, right? Yes. And there's the mirror image of this in the world of Torah. There's something available, like something is opened, and I want to go hear a message. I want someone to give me some advice on how to hear. Right? It's almost like a prerequisite for receiving advice from anything, is that you have to trust that it has potential, it has something in its bag to give you advice. Right? All right, let's open it up. Alina, yeah, Paul, Jesse, go ahead.
So I feel like there's this side of it that I feel in our world, that what we do matters, that we actually affect through our work. It's not just our ego working on ourselves, but also that our spiritual work matters in terms of where we're at right now in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that a lot, going back to Kendrick Lamar, and by the way, I kept thinking you should say Kendrick Lamar, because it's like he said something, and he said, and Kendrick, by the way, it's also Kendrick Lamar. Remember last week when we talked about, I'm not being political here, I am, but I'm not. Remember last week we talked about the bitter on the bitter? And somebody came over to me and said that, I think it was Brian, right? Brian said to me, Mar, the word in Hebrew for bitter is Mar. Yes. And he said Mar-a-Lago. So maybe Kendrick Lamar was Mar to the Mar, right? He was Mar to the Mar to make it sweet. So Lamar, right? Also in Hebrew, Mar also means teacher, Lamar. Like when somebody comes along and gives you a blessing, it's customary to say V'chein and also Lamar to my master. So it's like someone says to you good things, you say V'chein Lamar, you too. Because Mar also means Mori, my teacher. So a lot of the online commentary about his political comments were, don't stop dancing. Your spiritual practices, right? That was also the underlining of Serena's dancing, was that you know, in the face of the game being rigged, right? Keep dancing,
Right.
right? Keep dancing, keep moving, right? And a person who wrote this piece in the Times that I loved, she herself was saying that for the first time since the inauguration for her, she could dance, and she let herself dance. And it was like, speaking of dancing, you know, the dancing queen here, that, yeah, our spiritual practices matter. And I also want to say more broadly, outside of the realm of spiritual practice, that in the political realm too, our voices, our individual practices, you know, the ways that we participate, like it's not just wonky, it's like, what are you doing? Like when you ask the Torah, what is it, my Torah? We might also say, what is my role right now in the Torah that I have to learn, and the Torah that I like asking Torah for guidance. And I think that that's also part of it too. So yeah, beautiful poem.
To me, what Yitro understood when he heard
I'm so sorry. Could you move the mic closer to Paul, please? Thank you.
Yeah. This is moving mic. Okay, go ahead.
big things were happening in the world, and Yitro heard that and understood with great instability comes great instability. And
Great instability comes great.
great
Instability.
instability. That the world is in flux. And when that happens, chaos reigns. And so there needed to be, and a requirement must be for some structure. Now, the Torah speaks about a legal structure, but I think the broader message is societal structure. That Moses needed help. And he was there to help Moses understood that help was required, which took a specific course, legal course, but was much more expansive. And that might be the distinction between seeing Torah and hearing Torah. To see Torah is incomplete. It's a second hand. You're seeing other people react to Torah, as opposed to hearing Torah or feeling Torah, which is direct interaction. And Yitro wanted Moses to understand that other kinds of direct interaction with Torah and society was needed.
Yeah, and where did Jethro get this Torah from? Like, broader question, like we don't know much about Jethro. The Midrash, you know, definitely has something to say about Jethro's life, but certainly Jethro teaching Moshe that at a time of great instability, we need structures, and that we need, like, not only to see Torah, but to hear Torah. In Paul's rendering here is, like, to know it in a particular way, Paul, am I accurately, like, and that there needs to be the structured sense of society. Yeah.
Moses was unprepared. He was a prophet,
Right.
but he wasn't yet a leader.
Right.
And we know, reading the Torah, that his leadership was still in formation at
Right.
the very end. And an intervention was required.
Right.
For all of these reasons that we're talking about.
Right. All right, so let's go, Jesse, and then Richard's going to give us an insight from, I'm sure, the Zohar or something. So go ahead, Jesse, and then we'll come to Richard, and then we'll close. Yeah.
Just so many beautiful things that you're saying that feel connected also to other things you've said in past Torah studies. Because what I'm hearing, like, it's today hard to hear, you know, we should do what God wants. We should be obedient to God, and yet, and not like, how is this going to help me, and how will I feel better, right? But on some level, it's the same thing, right? That it seems like, you know, by being obedient to God, by serving God, and hearing it in our own way, hearing what we hear, that's the only way we get to give who we are to the world, right?
Right.
And further, right, that's what you talked about earlier, past things about Zusia, right, who says, you know, you're so wonderful, but
Right.
not like were you Moses? No, was I
Right.
Lucia? So
Right.
we have to be obedient to God in here in our own way, so we can be who we are. That's why we're here, right? There's only one.
Right. No. There's only one us, and there's something very, very personalized. And the broader conversation about the relationship between self-development and self-knowledge and spiritual experience and the rigors and and contours of any particular practice or system is it's a very essential debate and has merit, right? People might say when you ask this question around religion, because of we're not living in a religious age, it kind of lands in a flat way. But if you apply it in any other context of our lives, it's the same conversation, right? If you say to somebody, what would it take to become a great musician? And you say to them, well, from the beginning, you should be taught only to enjoy the music and do as much as you want. And that will be the key to excellence in music. Like music is not about you. It is about you. It's not about learning the classics or having to know the classics. It's all about your own self-expression, right? There's certainly a school of thought like that. But no teacher of music or appreciator of real music would ever say that actually is a smart way to develop great musicians. Like you would say, like, no, you have to subdue and submit your own personal musical inclinations at first before you become a master. You have to learn what are the principles and the rules. And to the extent that you emphasize your personal experience over those quote unquote rules too early on, you will never ever become, right? So I think that it's the same argument in every field, but in religion, because we live in such a time where religion is so fraught with all kinds of metaphysical assumptions that so few people really still believe. Like you can't get them to say, oh, Judaism is God's word or will, for the most part, in liberal circles. Like it sounds evangelical and fundamentalist and dangerous and for good reason, right? But there is a religious impulse. I remember we had converts in our community who came from the Mormon world, and they were both academics. They were incredible couple with their girls, and they were on a religious journey from Mormonism towards Judaism. And they did not see, right? They were not fundamentalist in the sense that they bought a hook, line, and sinker that every letter of the Torah was from God. But as devotees of religion and what it meant to surrender to God's will, they were very much put off, I remember, by an ethos of what's in this for me. And they eventually moved to Jerusalem. They are Orthodox, or Orthoprax, I should say. They are very observant. And their observance is not because they think, oh, this is God's word, I'm going to go to hell. But they feel like the integrity of the system demands that they ask different questions. It's not always, oh, was that a good experience? I'll have more of it. It was always like, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, but I'm going to show up because I self-surrender into the system because that's the only way the system will work. And there's room for that. But I think your point, anyway, if we could just bracket that, coming back to your point, which is the only Torah we have to give is a Torah that's unique to us, is a truism that is so easy to forget in the world, like that you have Torah to give, and to ask what is the Torah that I'm giving is a really profoundly Chernobyl question. Richard, go ahead.